On today's episode of the Hoop Life Productions podcast, AJ and Chance go over their Eastern Conference and Western Conference All-Stars. Let us know down in the comments down below what you would change. But without further ado, AJ, play the intro.
All right, so the Eastern and Western Conference All-Stars, this has actually been pretty hard to decide, like looking back, and we haven't really noticed throughout the season how many guys have been playing so well. The league is just so stacked, it's been really hard for us to decide. I don't know if it's been the same like for you, Chance.
Right, I mean, when you got 12 guys that you can pick from in each conference, there's always going to be snubs, and especially this year with, like you said, so many talented players in the league. It seems like every team's got their star player. You know, some teams are worse than others, obviously, but there's a lot of deserving guys in each conference. So yeah, let's just I guess we'll start with the Eastern Conference, right?
Yeah, we'll go ahead and do that.
Let's start with our honorable mentions. So I had a list of 7 honorable mentions, and there definitely could be more, but the first one on my list was Julius Randle, and it was very hard to keep him off my list. Did you had him in?
Julius Randle made it for me, yes.
Okay. Yeah, and that's more than fair because he's got this Knicks team playing the best basketball that they've played in since 2013 or ish.
That team with Jeremy Lin and Melo and Stoudemire, right, and all that.
Yeah, a whole lot of veterans, but yeah. As we all know, they've been like the laughing stock of the NBA for ever since that 2012 year. So Randall's been the best player they've had. They kind of run their offense through him, and he's played really well because of it.
And he's like a point forward in a way. It's kind of crazy. Like, he has like LeBron-like qualities to him. Not comparing Julius Randle to LeBron James, but like I think that's part of his game that hasn't always been there. Like, you look, he was really good in high school. He was like a stud in high school. He was one of those mixtape guys everybody knew. And then on the Lakers, he struggled, and then he had a really good season on the Pelicans, but nothing like this. Like, the upgrade he's made as a playmaker has made the rest of his game so much better, and the way the Knicks revolve around him is kind of crazy.
And I want to give a special shout out to Coach Tibbs for kind of getting this out of him, because last year nobody was giving him respect for what he was doing because he was kind of like a black hole on offense. Like, they would run through it, but he wasn't always making the right plays. They can do a lot with not having the necessary talent around you or shooters. But yeah, I mean, their roster as a whole is better. There's more shooting, but definitely a long way to go for the Knicks. But Julius Randle is definitely taken a huge step forward this year, and
he's such a Tibbs guy too. Like,
yeah, for sure.
Just the way he plays.
Yeah, Tibbs got him playing a bunch of minutes, and he's making good use of those minutes. So yeah, I had him as an honorable mention with a shot at making the All-Star team for sure. And then next on my list was Jimmy Butler. Did you have him in?
He's an honorable mention for me as well.
Okay, yeah. Jimmy is obviously an All-Star caliber player. In fact, you can make the case that he's a superstar for what he did in the bubble last year. But at the end of the day, he's missed too many games for me. And then the Heat are underachieving so far this year. Although in the last couple of weeks they've slightly turned it around, but they're still not where they need to be.
Yeah, and I don't know if you saw with him coming back now, in his time of being out, he lost a lot of weight. Like, I think it was 15 pounds or something.
Yeah.
And he looks a lot skinnier, which I don't know if that's proven to be a good or a bad thing yet, but that's just the thing about him. But
I can say something about Jimmy Butler. Since he's came back, he's been one of the best players in the league. But
for sure.
When you've missed that many games, it's hard to put him in the All-Star team. It's not to say he won't make it, but there's just so many guys this year in both conferences that are able to make the All-Star team when it comes down to numbers and team wins and all that stuff. So
Jimmy over the years has been like maybe the hardest player in the league to rank. Like you think about it, when he was in Chicago, he was getting more known and getting his name up there, and then in Minnesota, he was labeled as a cancer for a while because of all the stuff that was going on there. And then he goes to Philly, and it was hard to see his value because he had so many good players around him. But then when he left, we saw like, oh wow, they need a Jimmy Butler, right. And then he's always been like looked at least in my opinion, by NBA fans until recently, like maybe right at or maybe right below the level of a guy like Paul George. And now we see what he did last year. Like, we don't think Paul George would lead that Miami team to the finals and all that. So it's so hard to rank him, and he's absolutely an all-star caliber player. But
right, when we made our top 50 list, I think we both had him in the top 15. So, I mean, we showed him our respect. I'm not sure if everybody does, but yeah, I had him as an honorable mention. Just off the fact that he hasn't played as many games. And then the next person on my list was Ben Simmons. And now I think there's a good chance he makes it because the Sixers are first in the East, but his production just hasn't gotten any better since his rookie season. So I love what he does on the defensive end and his playmaking and his size, but like I said before, there's 12 certain All-Stars this year, so it's hard to put him in there.
Yeah, man. I mean, I've been a fan of Simmons since he came out of college, and I've always tried to give him the credit that I think a lot of people haven't because of his lack of three-point shooting or aggressiveness or whatever it is, but it's just really hard to put him in this year. He's at his numbers are at an all-time low compared to, like, right now wasn't his rookie season his best year in terms of statistics?
Pretty sure. So far, yeah, it is.
Yeah, and he hasn't been bad, but he's taken a less of a role with the dominance that Embiid has had this season. So, yeah, I don't think I'd have him in there either. I had him as an honorable mention as well. And
that moves us on to Chris Middleton, who I think we both had as honorable mentions, right?
Yep, I had him as well.
He's a two-time All-Star. He made it in 2020 and 2019. So him making it this year wouldn't be surprising, but like I definitely have a few guys over him this year, unfortunately. But Middleton's production continues to get better year in and year out, and he's on the Bucks team that always seems to be at the top of the Eastern Conference. So it's hard to not put him in that top 12. But yeah, this year I just had him as an honorable mention.
Yeah, I mean, same reasons as you. He's just that perfect piece. Any team could love to have a Chris Middleton. He doesn't do anything that nobody doesn't want. So, yeah, I mean, honorable mention simply
he's just solid year in year out.
Yeah, and simply for the fact that we've kind of been waiting on a reason to have him out, not in a way of dislike, but we've never been able to be like, no, he can't be in it because, you know, like, their team has been so dominant and he's been so well, but with the slight step back that they've taken this year, I think it's time to be like somebody else gets the shine.
Yeah, that's fair for sure. Then I want to move on to a trio of other guys that have played really well this year, that being Gordon Hayward, Nikola Vucevic, and my guy Jeremy Grant.
Yep, I have the same three.
Yep. Gordon Hayward has kind of had a resurrecting year with the Charlotte Hornets, averaging around 25 points per game. And in terms of statistics, he's actually playing better than he was in Utah. So shout out to him for grinding through all the injuries. Yep. And, he's balling out this year.
Good for him, man.
And then Nikola Vucevic, it seems like the older he gets, the better he plays year in, year out. I think he's made an all-star team before, but this year the Magic are just so far out of the Eastern Conference race by now because of injuries, obviously. I think they have a shot, fully healthy, but this year it's just been kind of unfortunate with the injuries of Jonathan Isaac and Markelle Fultz. So yeah, he's been a bright spot on that team, but I just couldn't quite put him in there. And then a Piston, Jeremy Grant. I think he's definitely the favorite with Christian Wood out to win
MIP,
Most Improved Player, right? He's averaging 24 points, like 6 rebounds and 4 assists. I mean, he's almost doubled his scoring output from previous seasons. So,
Yeah.
so for him to, he signed this $20 million contract. A lot of people thought that was too much for a guy that's been no more than like a fourth option on a good team, right?
And I think now it's turning out that that's the team's fault that he was fourth option and not him.
Right.
Like, you look in, I think I've probably said this before, but you look at Denver and, like, there's no reason that he shouldn't have been starting over Paul Millsap last season.
True. Yeah.
He was still getting his feet together in OKC and Philadelphia, but I think by the time he got to Denver last year, he was ready to take that step, and Detroit gave it to him this year.
Yeah, right. Like you said, he's gotten this great opportunity to play a key role on a Pistons team that is rebuilding, but he's got a few years to like figure out how to be this number one option, and he's definitely taken full advantage of it early on. So, I think a lot of Pistons fans that I've seen have Grant as an all-star for sure, but I just look at the reserves and how can you put him over a guy like Zach LaVine or Bam Adebayo or Trae Young when those teams are better, right? The Pistons have the worst record in the East, and guys on those type of teams don't usually make the All-Star team. So, So yeah, and that moves us into our Eastern Conference reserves. AJ, how about you go over who you have as a reserve for the Eastern Conference?
All right, so we'll start with Zach LaVine. Guy's just hooping, man. He's a bucket. Like, I don't think people still realize how good Zach LaVine is. Like, he has times in the games where I think he's up there with like guys like we've seen Klay Thompson. Trying to think of other guys that just catch fire. Like, when Zach LaVine is hot, there's nothing you can do to stop him because he's so athletic. He's kind of like Westbrook in a way that when he shoots, he just jumps so high no one can guard his jump shot. And his ability, what's he averaging right now? Like
close to 30.
Close to 30. I know for the first like 6-game stretch it was like 35 or something crazy like that. And yeah, the Bulls aren't good, but I don't think you can put that on Zach LaVine. I think it's similar to a Bradley Beal situation.
Yeah, I was just going to mention that. For both of those guys, I had Beal as a starter, and I think you did too, right? Well. So yeah, they're kind of in the same boat as like they're putting up great stats, but their teammates just aren't getting the job done at the end of the day. And I wouldn't say it's much of their fault, but you'd like to see them get more wins. But Zach LaVine this year has been a well-deserving All-Star. So, and then who was another guy you had as a reserve? Let's see, did you put Trae Young as a...
Trae Young did not make my All-Star team.
Okay, and I had him. I think that's really the only difference we had in our list. So this should be pretty easy to do.
But another reserve I had Domantas Sabonis.
Yep.
Another crazy thing, there's a lot of years in NBA history where Domantas Sabonis starts on an All-Star team. Like, he's been so good.
Nobody talks about him either.
Nobody talks about him. He's a centerpiece of that offense, which is crazy because they got a lot of really good weapons. By the way, I wanted to bring this up about the Indiana Pacers. It's kind of interesting. So, as Chance knows, and maybe some people listening, I work at Amazon. And the other day, I was like unboxing these boxes, and certain boxes will say business on them if it's going to like a corporation instead of one person. And the business said Indiana Pacers on it. And I opened it up, and it was like 50 Karis LeVert official jerseys.
Really? That's sick.
So they were being sent right to Indianapolis, which I thought was kind of cool. So I don't know if that was going to the team or whatever. But yeah, that just reminded me. But so many weapons on that team, and he's still like that number one guy, and he absolutely deserves an All-Star now this season.
Right, they've got all those weapons, but a lot of them are hurt, right? LeVert's out for an extended period of time.
We're just glad to hear that about LeVert's
and then
health, though.
T.J. Warren's out for a few months. That happened a while ago, but he's been out. But he's totally, him and Malcolm Brogdon have totally carried this Pacers team in the offensive end, and he's managed to keep them afloat in the Eastern Conference somehow. It seems like they do this every year because they just, year after year, they have injury problems. But Sabonis has been a guy that just keeps them afloat every year, and I think he definitely deserves to be an All-Star again.
Mm-hmm.
And then let's talk about the case for Trae Young, because I had him in and you didn't. Why didn't you have Trae Young in?
I just think he hasn't met his standards this year. Like, he hasn't been as aggressive. It's been up since the last time we talked about this. I think he got his free throws attempt per game up or whatever. But for the first few games, not even like, I don't know, 8-game stretch or whatever, his free throws were cut in half. And I think for a guy like Trae Young, he just has to be more aggressive. And you just look at the competition. Like, I can't put him over some of these other guys. Even a guy like Kyrie, who's missed a significant amount of games, I can't put him in there for the simple fact that he hasn't been as good as we thought. And I don't think the Hawks team has met the expectations. But they have had injuries, I'll give you that.
They're sitting right around 500, which, but in my predictions for the standings this year, I had them as like a 7 or 8 seed, kind of float around 500, but squeak into the Eastern Conference playoffs. And I think they're in the playoff race right now, which hasn't happened in a few years. And Trae Young is obviously the first option there, and he's still averaging close to 30, and he's the lead playmaker, lead scorer. You can talk about what he doesn't do on the defensive end, which is pretty much everything.
Yeah.
But it's just from a lack of size, and I think he more than makes up for it on the offensive end.
It's not a thing where Trae Young makes the All-Star game and I'm at home hurt. Like, how did they let this guy in? Like, Trae Young's a superstar. Like, I'm not trying to take anything away from him. Yeah. I'm just comparing it to his
I get your case for not having him in, but I just like the fact that he was a starter last year, right? And they were worse as a team. And he's putting up close to as good of numbers as he did last year, and they're a better team. So I feel like he deserves recognition for being an all-star. But another guy is Bam Adebayo, who has been the most consistent guy in the Heat this year, just from Jimmy Butler not playing as much. But he's been pretty much the go-to guy this year, down low, playing really good ball. So I think that the Heat still deserve to have one All-Star, so I put Bam Adebayo in there.
Yeah, I had him as well. The way he's playing, like, defensively, he's the core of that team.
Right.
And they just, where they'd be without him, with Jimmy out, they've already haven't met expectations, but they'd be so much worse.
Right.
So I agree completely with that.
So our last 3 reserves of the Eastern Conference, I had Jason Tatum, and then the Brooklyn Nets backcourt of Kyrie Irving and James Harden, for obvious reasons.
Yep.
There's no way you can leave any of these 3 guys out on your ballot. And if you are, I'm not sure where you're getting your information from. Maybe you're watching Flight. But
James Harden's an interesting one. Obviously, we have him in the All-Star game. But I've heard people talk about, like, the fact that how he played in Houston, and now he's taken, like, a backseat so far to even Kyrie. But James Harden.
But now he's leading the league in assists.
Yeah, he's in the All-Star game
impressive.
For sure. So overall, my reserves were Kyrie, Harden, Sabonis, Tatum, Julius Randle, Bam Adebayo, and Zach LaVine.
Yep, and Tatum, it's going to be weird to have Jaylen Brown in the starting lineup and Tatum off, because I would still say Tatum is a better player, but he was on COVID protocol for a couple weeks, and Jaylen Brown has been phenomenal this year on both ends.
We were to force Boston's front office to build around one guy, they'd go Tatum, but Jaylen Brown, you have to give him the nod.
Yeah, if they have those guys for the next decade or so, which they can, right?
Yep.
They definitely have a shot at winning the title, and I'd be perfectly fine if I was a Celtics fan with having Tatum and Brown the next decade.
Jeez. Yeah.
So, that's our Eastern Conference reserves. We just had one change. I had Trae Young, and he had
Julius Randle.
And he had Julius Randle in there. So that moves us into our Eastern Conference starters, and we had the same list of Bradley Beal, Jaylen Brown, Kevin Durant, Giannis, and Embiid.
Oh, no.
Oh, no?
I didn't have Jaylen Brown. I had Bruce Brown.
Bruce Brown.
No, I'm just kidding.
Okay.
No.
I was about to say.
No. Yeah, we had the same 5.
He's just a big Nets fan, I guess, now. He doesn't like to talk about it. But yeah, I think the front court was probably the easiest thing ever to do, right? If you leave Kevin Durant, Giannis, or Embiid out of your starters, then I don't think you watch basketball on a regular basis. These guys have been dominant this year, especially Embiid, who was taking his game to a whole nother level. So
still my MVP right now. Which
yeah, he's up there for sure. And then Giannis continues to do his thing. The Bucks aren't as good record-wise, but it's Giannis. He's a two-time MVP, and he's still putting up great numbers, so he deserves to be a starter. And then Kevin Durant, coming off a torn Achilles, and he hasn't missed a step. So
no, he's been great. I mean, in these last few game stretches, I've been watching some highlights and some posts, and I even read an article the other day. His defense is starting to get back to not quite what it was in Golden State, but when he came in, obviously, when he came back from his injury, he wasn't that defender anymore, and he's slowly getting back there. If he starts really defending again like he was in Golden State, this team is going to be, I don't think they can be beaten except for maybe the Lakers.
Right. Yeah, it's crazy. And then for our backcourt, we already talked a little bit about Jaylen Brown, but we can talk a little bit more about him. When Tatum was out, he took the reins as the go-to scorer for the Celtics, and he didn't disappoint, right? He was averaging around 30 points and kind of being this lead playmaker, kind of, with Kemba Walker not completely playing up to his, his normal level of play, right? But yeah, he managed to keep the Celtics at the top of the Eastern Conference, or up near the top of the East, which they have been for years, but...
In that 2016 draft, the top 3 picks were Ben Simmons, Brandon Ingram, and Jaylen Brown.
Yeah.
Right now, does Jaylen Brown been the best this season of those 3?
I think so.
Yeah.
In years total career, it's a different discussion,
Yeah.
but I think this year alone, I think he is for sure.
It would have been really interesting to see, because when Jaylen Brown came out of that team, he didn't get a lot of minutes right away, and then Tatum came and took even more away. So it would have been interesting to see if he had went to a bad team like Simmons and Ingram did, to see where he'd be at now career-wise compared to those guys.
Yeah.
But yeah, shout out to Jaylen Brown, man. I don't think anyone saw this coming, so it's great to see.
For sure. And then our last guy in the backcourt as a starter for the Eastern Conference is Bradley Beal. And, I mean, he's averaging 35 points a game. Last year he was snubbed out of the All-Star game, and this year I don't think there's a chance that happens again, right? The Wizards have been really disappointing, but Bradley Beal, you can't put any of the blame on him. He puts up 40-point games on good efficiency, and they still lose. At the end of the day, what can one guy do?
Yeah, obviously he's proven that one guy can't change it all unless his name is LeBron James. But
right.
Yeah, he's just been amazing, man. And we made that video, our last video, or was it one of our last videos was basically free Bradley Beal. We made a whole video just on that,
right,
and then
exactly.
Of course I post that video. A few hours later, I get I go scroll on Instagram, do my usual checking social media, and I see that he wants to stay in Washington, and I'm like, what have they put in this guy's head?
It was terrible timing on our part.
Yeah.
We should have got that out a week earlier.
What have they put in this guy's head? I guess I don't get it. I mean, maybe he's just a loyal guy, but
there's nothing wrong with that, but
I would kill to see Bradley Beal's points mean a lot more than they do.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. But yeah, that is the Eastern Conference All-Stars for us.
Shout out to the East, man. The East has always been seen as the weaker conference most of our lives, and they have just really improved these last few years.
And you know why that is? I think because LeBron went
west.
LeBron went west, and all the guys that lost to him went east. So it's kind of weird how that happens. But yeah, that moves us to the Western Conference. Let's start off with some honorable mentions. I had Chris Paul, De'Aaron Fox, Jamal Murray, Ja Morant, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Zion, and Brandon Ingram as honorable mentions.
Right.
Just outside making the All-Star game.
You had a few more than me, but I had the same guys. I had Chris Paul, De'Aaron Fox, Zion, Shai, and Brandon Ingram. So
okay. But yeah, I mean, we can go through these real quick. Chris Paul continues to be... I mean, he just continues to do Chris Paul things out there. whatever team he goes to, they get better. He's got the Suns at a playoff spot for the first time in like a decade, right? So there's a chance that he makes the All-Star game for sure, but I had him just outside of it. And then
teams that run into that backcourt of Paul and Booker in the playoffs are gonna have trouble.
For real,
for
yeah.
sure. Yeah.
De'Aaron Fox is another guy. If you had an All-Star game just based off the last month, De'Aaron Fox would be in there for sure because
Jeez.
I think the Kings themselves have won 8 out of like their last 9 games, and De'Aaron Fox is averaging like 30
Did you
and
see,
8.
Did you see that clip that went viral of him like in he like Euro'd past Zion and then like faked out Alonzo for that was crazy.
Yeah, he's been playing incredible.
His bag is so deep. He's just so good.
So yeah, De'Aaron Fox deserves some recognition for he's an all-star caliber player now. I think he's taken that next step in his career, so we give him his recognition there. You didn't have Jamal Murray as an honorable mention, but I mean he's the second best player on a playoff team. He's been a little disappointing compared to like the expectations we set for him.
I just feel like there's other guys that you could put in his position. Like
Right.
I feel like Colin Sexton in his position would do very similar things. A guy like that, and
I can see that. Yeah,
that's just all it is. And he's just on and off. Like if he was bubble Jamal Murray, like
there'd be no question.
he'd be start.
Yeah.
but that's just not what he is, and it's really all it comes down to.
Right, and there's just so many good guards in the Western Conference. And speaking of that, there's a pair of guards that I left out. John Morant and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. I think they're going to be Western Conference All-Stars at some point, but I think it's a little too early to put them in. In a few years, I definitely see them being All-Stars, but for now, I left them as honorable mentions.
Yeah, I mean, as a Thunder fan, I would love to see Shai in the All-Star game, but it's
sure.
just so deep and so hard for him to make it right now. And I think a lot of people look at his great stats he's putting up and they see the fact that he has maybe the greenest light in the NBA right now. Like, he doesn't really have to share the ball a whole bunch, and it'll be interesting to see. He obviously, I don't think he's going to make it, but in the future, him and John Morant are both going to be All-Stars.
Yeah, for sure. And then my last 2 honorable mentions were a pair of Pelicans in Zion and Brandon Ingram. I left them out because they're not in the All-Star. I mean, they're not in the playoff race as of now. They are on a 4-game win streak, but they're still sitting outside the playoff race even. So I think if they are a playoff team, then one of them gets it. I don't think both of them get it, but they definitely have made a case to be All-Stars this year.
I agree completely. They're both hooping, and they just need more time. Obviously, it started out really rough, and now they're getting it together. But I think it's too late to put them in there at this point.
Right. And so moving on to our Western Conference All-Star reserves, I had Anthony Davis, Luka Doncic, Donovan Mitchell, Paul George, Rudy Gobert, Devin Booker, and DeMar DeRozan. Was there anything that you changed on that list?
No, I had Anthony Davis, Dame Lillard, Donovan Mitchell, Paul George, Rudy Gobert, Devin Booker, DeMar DeRozan. I think, is that the same?
So I think we just flipped. Did we just flip Dame and Luka or what?
I have Luka starting for me. So yeah.
Yeah, so we just flipped.
We just
you just flipped Dame and Luka.
Yeah,
that's fair. Yeah, you can definitely make the case for either of them. So that's fair. But with Anthony Davis, he, at the end of the day, he just hasn't been one of the 3 best forwards this year. Like, Kawhi and Jokic have definitely played better, but Anthony Davis is definitely an all-star, and he's the first guy off the bench for them.
Yeah, I think he makes it by default for the fact that the Lakers are so good, and we know who Anthony Davis is. Even though he's getting to a slow start, like, we know who Anthony Davis is.
I mean, I guess a slow start is averaging like 24 and 12.
Yeah, yeah. And being still one of the best defensive players in the league.
And then, yeah, with Luka Doncic, I think the thing that kept him off my starters list
is their record.
Yeah, it's their record for sure. They have struggled this year, and it's kind of surprising because I had them as like a top 6 seed. And I still think that's possible, right? It's early on in the year, but Luka Doncic has played really well. He's an all-star for sure. He's averaging almost like a 30-point triple-double, something ridiculous, right? So, yeah, he definitely deserves a reserve spot at least.
If you would have asked me before the season if I'd have Dame start in the All-Star game, I'd say of course, because I think he was my MVP pick. I'm pretty sure. I know Luka was, but Dame was he was second.
Yeah.
And he hasn't been bad. He just hasn't met those expectations. So it's easier for me to put a guy like Luka over him, who just has a lot less to work with than Dame right now, in my opinion.
Yeah. Let's talk about the pair of Utah Jazz players that have taken this team to a whole nother level, at least early on in this year. They're top in the Western Conference over like the LA teams, they're over the Nuggets, all those teams that I thought were much better than them coming into the season. But Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert have got the Jazz playing really good basketball.
Yeah, and I have them both in there as well. But before we talk about them, I wanted to give a shout out to Mike Conley for the simple fact that, like you just said, you didn't have him above those teams like Denver and LA and all that. But last year, going into last season, including me, a lot of people did have him right in there, like the top 4 teams. And they didn't meet those expectations because Mike Conley didn't meet his expectations. And he's been really good this season. I think that has a lot to do with how good they are. But of course, it comes down to Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert. And Rudy, he got that big contract. He's been received a lot of hate for that, and just a lot of questions. But this season, he's still been that great defensive guy down low. And Donovan Mitchell has just, I think he's averaging 24 a game, and he's just been a star, having a great year.
Yeah, I think if you're a top team in your conference, you kind of deserve to have at least 1 or 2 All-Stars, right? With Mitchell, he's making like the right play this year. I think that's been one of the bad parts of his game in years past, like sometimes trying a little too hard to get things going, but
yeah, kind of Russell Westbrook-like in a way.
But yeah,
but much better.
But him making that change has got them playing really good basketball. And then with Gobert, like you said, he's one of the best rim protectors in the league. And I wouldn't say he's necessarily taken a jump this year, but we haven't really seen a drop-off either. So I think he deserves to be...
He's been better this year than last year, statistically.
Right, yeah. So. And then, Paul George was a reserve for both of us just due to the fact that the forwards in the Western Conference starters are ridiculous, right? But yeah, Paul George having a really good season, kind of a bounce back from what we saw in the bubble. What do you got on Paul George?
It's just great to see him hooping and proving people wrong. Like, was the target of NBA meme pages over the break after the bubble. Somewhat deserved because he did a lot of talking and he didn't back it up. But it's great to see him playing the way he is. Him and Kawhi have been really close, honestly, in terms of impact on their team. And his defense, and he's shooting the ball so well this year. We just had to give him the nod. That's really all it is.
Yeah, I think he came into this year with a little extra motivation because too many people wrote him off after struggling in the bubble. We just weren't seeing the usual Paul George that we were used to, right? Like he looked like a shell of his former self, but shout out to him for bouncing back this year, and he's an all-star, no question. So.
For sure.
And then the last 2 reserves that I had were Devin Booker and DeMar DeRozan.
Yep.
Booker because he continues to be a really good scorer. I think he's a plus defender, right, at the 2 guard.
Yeah.
Maybe
I think he's
average.
improved. His first few years, he was definitely a negative defender, and I think he's really improved in that way.
Right, and then DeMar DeRozan, who I haven't seen on a lot of All-Star ballots, but I wanted to give the San Antonio Spurs a shout-out because they're 15-10 in this. Like, they just refuse to go away.
Mm-hmm. Looks like it's going to be another winning season for Pop.
Yeah, it's crazy. I think we're gonna have a video just about them in a few weeks. I thought it would be a good idea just to give them a shout out in the whole video. So we won't talk about too much about DeRozan, but he's been the best player on the playoff team. Not much else needs to be said.
Playing the small ball 4 too. Like, that's crazy.
it is. Would you have thought 3 years ago that he'd be playing the power forward at some point in his
No,
career?
because 3 years ago when he was in Toronto, I didn't see him playing the 3 in San Antonio.
Sure, yeah.
So him playing the 4 is crazy. And it just shows you how the league's changing. Like, every year, a guy's position changes because a guy at his position needs to be smaller.
But yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, we had DeMar DeRozan grabbing the last All-Star reserve spot. That might be controversial, but at the end of the day, he's the best player on a playoff team. So shout out to DeMar DeRozan. And now the last part of our video, we're doing the All-Star starters for the Western Conference. And let's start off with the backcourt. I had Steph Curry and Dame, and then you had Steph Curry and Luka.
Yeah, what was your reason for Dame over Luka? Like, get more into that.
I think both of them definitely make a really good case, but Dame has been incredible this year. Like, he seems to take his game up a notch on the offensive level every year. He's averaging close to 30, and he's managed to keep the Trailblazers in a playoff spot in the tough Western Conference with guys like C.J. McCollum and Yusuf Nurkic going out early on in the season. So he's kind of had a bigger role than we're used to seeing, and he's totally taken advantage of it.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. Like, I just have Luka over for the simple fact, as I said earlier, he has so much less to work with, and I don't think we've seen a drop off in Luka's game. But as far as Dame, I mean, he's been great. So I can't really...
Yeah, you can make a case for either of them, and I wouldn't be mad at you for sure.
Yeah, I can't really disagree. I mean, I have a guy in a different spot with Luka, but it's not... It's close. Like, it's not something I'd freak out about.
But let's give a shout out to Stephen Curry, who, coming off that hand injury last year, I think it was, or wrist, something along those lines. He's been phenomenal this year, right?
Crazy.
He hasn't taken a step back at all. He's the guy now in Golden State, and he's managed to keep a pretty mediocre supporting cast this year, and he's got them in the playoff race. So I think he's a definite all-star starter this year.
Yeah, you're the opposing point guard. You don't ever want to play the Golden State Warriors. It's been like that for a while now. Yeah. It feels like every night...
You're in for a long night because he's just running around and running around.
It feels like every night I look on SportsCenter and he's hit some shot that nobody in the league other than maybe Dame Lillard can make. And he's just... I mean, you can't really have anybody else there. I mean, he's earned that respect in the way that he's been gone out for a year, and everyone still saw him as, like, the best point guard.
Right, like, I still think he's going to get a ton of fan votes, too. Like, even if we put him as reserve, it's not going to do anything. Like, there's so many Steph Curry fans out there to the point where he's going to be an all-star starter even past his prime, I think.
Yep.
Because he's built that reputation for himself. Well, let's move on to the Western Conference forwards. And I think there should be no debate for who the Western Conference forward are, and that's LeBron James.
Lou Dort.
Lou Dort.
Of course, LeBron James.
Yeah, LeBron, for obvious reasons. We don't need to talk about him. He just continues to be ridiculous.
Him and Tom Brady, they don't know what Father Time is, man. They just keep dominating.
It's not existent for them. But yeah, and then Kawhi Leonard. He's been the best player. A little bit better than Paul George. He's been the best player on, like, I think they're the 3 seed in the West. So, I mean, and it's Kawhi Leonard. Like, he's built this reputation of being an all-star starter anyway. So
I haven't really paid attention to his defense, but you could tell me this if you know. On First Take yesterday, Kendrick Perkins said that LeBron has been a better defender this year. I mean,
I would have to look more into that.
I would assume
fact check him.
I would assume it's Kawhi for the simple fact that LeBron has slowed down on defense these last few years. But I just thought that was funny.
If Perkins can back it up with facts, then I would believe him. But
he doesn't do that. So
yeah, exactly, he doesn't do that. He isn't exactly been my favorite analyst on national television.
No one from the 08 Celtics seems to do well
yeah,
on television.
And it just seems like he says controversial things, even if he truly in his heart doesn't believe it, just to get clicks and stuff. But there's a lot of analysts that do that anyway, so it's not nothing that we haven't seen before.
Yeah.
So,
Hey.
well, yeah, that's enough Kendrick Perkins talk. We're talking about the Western Conference starters here.
Kendrick Perkins talk is enough.
Right.
Let's get on to centers that are actually good at basketball.
Yeah, exactly. The last guy of our video is Nikola Jokic. He's been, dare I say, like the best center that I have ever witnessed this year. So? Like statistically, him and Embiid have been like the best I've ever seen.
Is it? Answer this question for me. Is it weird that I have Joel Embiid as my MVP, but I still think Nikola Jokic is the best center in the league?
Yeah, that's the weird thing.
Yeah.
That's why I think the debate with them is more heated than it ever has been for obvious reasons.
I think you just look at the case Embiid has, it's better because of where his team's at and how dominant he's been, but Jokic is...
But then you look at Jokic's box scores and you're like, how did he do that?
He does not look like a guy who puts up 46 and 15, and I feel like I see it every few weeks.
46, 15, and 10.
Yeah, jeez, that's crazy. I don't think
something I don't understand with like him and James Harden, like when they get like 50 points, I'm like, where did they get time to get 10 assists?
Yeah.
Like, how are you getting 50 points and then you're spreading the ball around like and getting 10 assists?
It's crazy, especially coming from the center position.
Like it has a lot to do with usage rate. Like Nikola usage rates is one of the highest in the league for Denver for obvious reasons. They kind of need him to do that because Murray's kind of like this combo guard that can play off the ball most of the time.
Yeah, he's basically a 2. But he can really handle the ball.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that is our Eastern Conference and Western Conference All-Stars. Let us know what you think down below, what you would change, if we had any completely weird players on our list that you wouldn't put in there for sure. But make sure to check out our Instagram page at Hoop Life Productions, and then our Facebook page. I think it's Hoop Life Productions Podcast. But yeah, that's gonna be it for today's video. Be sure to check out our video coming on Friday. But yeah, that's gonna be it for us. Peace out. Love you guys.
Thanks for tuning in.